Hey everybody, welcome back. Natalie Cutler-Welsh here, and welcome back to another episode of the Impact Entrepreneur Series. Now, this is where I get a chance to really dive deep and talk to amazing business owners and entrepreneurs who also, like me, want to make a massive difference in terms of health and happiness here in New Zealand. So today I'm talking to Judith Yeavesley. Hello, Judith.
Hi, Natalie. Thank you so much for having me on. It's a real pleasure to be here.
I'm excited to dive into this topic. So you guys, today, Judith and I are going to talk about the impact of confident eating or eating with confidence and how that it can impact your happiness, your resilience, your wellness, and everything in between. So let's do it. So Judith, before we kick off, I'd love it if you could give us a little bit of backstory about how you help people currently and what brought you to this point.
Okay, so I work with individual families, I run workshops, I speak, and I do PD for organisations all around confident eating and eating in a way that's competent and joyful and not fearful. And the way that I got into it was I've always been really passionate about food for children. And I used to do a lot of stuff around fresh food and cooking with children. And what I found was that every second parent was saying, I know what to feed them, but I just don't know how to get them to eat it. So I was looking for people to refer these people to and realized that actually there was a huge gap in the support network in our society. We've got a lot of information on babies, sort of from milk to purees and purees to solids. But after that, there's very little information and often a lot of confusing and conflicting information. And there's very few people who will help a parent who's got a 3-year-old or a 7-year-old or a 12-year-old who's just not confident around food, getting them eating those normal foods that we all eat and we all want our children to eat.
It's so interesting. And you guys, I want to point out as well, when Judith and I were deciding where to do this interview, we looked at, do we do it under my parenting? If only they told me, my parenting blog and podcast that I've got. But we decided to do it here because one of the things Judith highlighted to me was that the food, your relationship with food in the younger years can really play out in lots of different ways in your life. It's not just about food. So I feel like this is such a great space to do it. So we're not really talking about like how to feed your baby. We're talking about instilling confidence and decision-making, not only with the kids, but with the parents as well, and how that plays out in the rest of their life. So this is exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. And there are a lot of reasons why eating competently is a real positive for us, because there are a lot of children and there are a lot of teens and there are a lot of young adults who just don't want to go to a party because they find the food challenging. Sleepovers become difficult. Camps are a really frightening thing when you're away from home for a week and the food's not the food that you like to eat. So there's a lot of ways that it can impact on you socially and emotionally. And of course, as a parent, I speak to parents of 5-year-olds who are already stressing about a camp that their child won't go on until they're 10 because they know that it's going to be such a big deal for them.
And I can just imagine that anticipation of the anxiety and how that plays out. So that's interesting. You're mentioning we've got the social side, and then overlapping with it, we've got the physical side, right? Because we know that when people don't eat a proper diet, their digestive system is affected. Therefore, that also plays up in their mental health and their mindset.
Oh, and it's a huge circular thing. You don't eat well, therefore it actually becomes a bigger hurdle to eat well because you're not eating well. And then because you're not eating well, you often become nutrient deficient. And so, for example, if you're not having enough zinc, then it changes the way that things taste and it changes your appetite. So there's so many ways that this can play out. And it's such a tragedy that as a society we don't see picky eating as a major problem.
Interesting. Yeah, because it is kind of the starting point that can then be an exponential. So let's dive into maybe some kind of solutions or tips. So for anyone out there that either has a child or even a teen, right, that is a picky eater, or turning them into a confident eater, what are some things that people can do to move towards that?
Oh, look, there's a ton of things. And if I was working with a family that had, an extremely picky eater, we'd work together for 4 hours just to really get over that first lot of information, because eating is so complicated. I mean, as we know for ourselves, we eat for a number of different reasons. We don't just eat because we're hungry. There's so many things that come into eating, and emotionally and psychologically, and all of this stuff that goes into it. However, there are some key things that are really important. So as a parent, if we're not confident that our child's able to eat something, how are they going to be confident that they're able to eat it? They're looking to us to know what to trust, what's going to be good, and how they should behave. And so we lose confidence as a parent, because when we repeatedly serve something and it repeatedly gets rejected, suddenly we go, oh, my child's not going to eat it. And we lose confidence that they're actually able to eat something new. And if we think about that in terms of reading or swimming, we would never do the things that we do around reading and swimming that we do around food. So, for example, we label people picky eaters.
Yeah.
That in effect says, you're not very good at eating. But we would never say, oh, well, my child's rubbish at reading, or not within earshot, because we know that that's so detrimental to them. And yet we do that with feeding. And so as a parent, believing that we're able to make a difference is really a very important starting point. And I believe that in 99% of cases, parents are the ones best placed to work with their child. No one's more invested, spends more time, or knows a child better than a parent. So they are the ones that are best able to support, but they just need the tools. And that's where I feel we're failing most as a society, because we're not providing those tools. Just like your baby doesn't come with a manual, feeding is supposed to be this normal, this natural sort of organic sort of process. And for a lot of kids it is, but actually for a lot of kids it isn't. But what happens when it goes wrong?
Yeah, that's right. And I love the way you say parents, it's not just the moms. And I know that when you work with families, you mentioned to me earlier, you get like mom and dad and child, yes. And maybe even granny or whoever's involved in.
No child, just mum and dad. And if grandma or nanny is taking, a good percentage of the parenting, then having them involved, it's really important. Everyone's on that same page, and they're all coming from the same, singing from the same songbook.
Yeah. Okay, cool. That's a good starting point. I think one of the things that came to mind when you were just discussing that is like people will try and then they'll think, oh no, they're just a picky eater. It brings to mind, the way that Brene Brown talks about resilience and how we as humans respond when times get tough, right? And so I imagine some parents will be like, that's it, I'm done. They go down the give up route, or maybe they or head in the sand. Whereas other parents would go down the frustration, like, I'm serving you this meal, you need to eat it, right? The frustration route. And others would, I guess, more of a growth mindset, might be like, okay, well, we'll try something different, or next week we'll try the same thing again, or more patient kind of response. So that's interesting too, for parents to kind of look at how have they handled the situation in the past, and most likely that's the way they handle most situations when they come to resilience in their life, and how can they do that better? So how can parents do that better? Because it's not easy. It is frustrating and disheartening.
It is terribly, terribly difficult, terribly frustrating. It's a long-term thing. I always like to equate it to reading. We read to our child for often 5 to 6 years. They don't read a word back to us. But every time we approach that book, we approach it positively. It's a loving process. It's special quality time with our child. It's something where we know the more we put in, the more that comes out later on down the track, even if we can't see it for 5 to 6 years. If we think of food in the same terms, then hopefully we can take away some of the frustration, because we are putting in all those building blocks in the same way as we are with reading. Even though our child may not be reading back to us, all that information's going in, they're learning, they're becoming more comfortable, and they're becoming more confident. If we think of food in exactly the same terms, then isn't that a lot easier? So it's not about that carrot today. It's about how we're building that confidence, that competence, that comfort level with that carer over time. And that may not be something that we can do 2 or 3 times. It may not be something we can do for 2 or 3 months, depending on our child and their comfort level with that food. But as soon as we give up serving the carrot, guess what? Not going to be eating carrots.
Yeah. Yeah. How much does role modeling play a part here?
A huge amount. If we are eating consistently with our children and we are modeling eating and modeling eating joyfully, then that's what our children are following. I mean, my favorite and scariest quote is, when our children leave home, they follow very little of our advice and almost all of our actions. And you know, and it's so true. But we need to model eating joyfully. And so if our family meal table is a battle zone, then we're not modeling eating in a way that is going to encourage our child to enjoy being at the table, be relaxed and eat food. And so, you know, there's lots of things that come into this, and there's lots of ways that we as a parent can have such an impact positively or inadvertently negatively.
Totally. I know that Jackie, who co-authored the book that we wrote together, If Only They Told Me, and she talked about making mealtime fun, not all the time, but sometimes making it kind of special, like getting out a tablecloth or, you know, putting out, like my boy loves, we have this little candelabra. He calls it a chandelier.
Yeah.
Candelabra. Anyway, and he loves, you know, setting the table and like just for special occasions, or even if it's not a special occasion, you know, making it fun, or maybe picnic at the park, you know, just randomly, or in the backyard having a picnic. Not all the time, but is that type of thing also helpful just to create a kind of a nice family environment?
Absolutely. Studies show that the more relaxed we are, the more likely we are to eat. So that's why when we are putting pressure on our child at the table, when it is a war zone, and when we are, you know, having those arguments all the time, our child is less likely to eat. The more relaxed they are, so that if we can sort of switch it up and change the dynamic, and, you know, if maybe dinners at the table have become a bit fractious, just to get the picnic blanket and put it in front of the you know, in front of the fire and have a picnic in the lounge room if it's raining, just changes that dynamic and enables everyone to behave in a different way.
I remember about a year ago, my husband decided that we were going to have pirate dinner, which basically means no cutlery. And the kids still remember it. And they're like, well, sometimes they'll say, can we have pirate dinner? So I think making mealtime special is really good. So personally, we have not struggled with the picky eater thing myself. So I can't express that. But I'd love to, we can come back to the younger years, but I'd love to jump ahead, particularly for people watching that have older kids. And maybe they've battled this the whole way through. But what we're experiencing now is husband who's gone vegan, children who are learning about, you know, where food comes from more and thinking a little bit more about dairy, etc. And husband who is making interesting, sometimes verging on food shaming comments, which I've discussed with him that I did not enjoy at the table. So that is something that, you know, we've never had the picky eater thing, but now we have a same but different scenario. We're wanting to educate, but also wanting to not go down that food shaming. So can we talk about food shaming or anything like that that's relevant?
Yeah, that's not my area of excellence, and it's not really where I sit. You know, for me, it's more children or young adults who say, you know what, I'm looking at that apple, I'd love to be able to eat it, but I just cannot bring myself to eat it. So it's not about anything to do with body image. It's not about anything to do with, well, I don't want to eat, you know, a cow because it's, you know, it's an animal. It's more, I'm looking at something and I'm just going, can't go there.
Yeah.
You know, but all these other things obviously have an influence as our children get older. And so, you know, there is starting to be a correlation between, you know, being a picky eater and later on having other issues around food, because of course having an uncomfortable relationship with food sets us off on the wrong path.
Mm-hmm. And that's, I guess, when I was talking about role modeling, I was thinking of, the classic scenario where the parent is standing beside the child maybe and going, you need to eat that. And they're not sitting with the child. They're not actually eating themselves. So I think what you said before about really having mealtime together, they see you enjoying food, they enjoy food. I think that's really important. Can we talk a little bit about, there's so many reasons why people are picky. And is one of them like the actual, like, the experience of it in their mouth, like they might not like texture, they might be more sensitive to smells. Does that play into it as well?
Yeah, huge. So look, there's a 1,000 different reasons why people are picky eaters, and it could be a medical issue. About 80% of people on the spectrum are likely to have issues eating, because the two go hand in hand. Obviously, if you've had allergies, undiagnosed allergies, and your first impression of eating that it makes you uncomfortable or it makes you vomit, all of those go in. And then there's also all the textural, smell, all of those sort of issues. And so, you put something in your mouth and you go, oh my goodness, that just feels disgusting, or the smell alone, upsets you. But all of these things we can work with. Although you may struggle with certain textures, there are ways that you can become more comfortable with them. And children, although they don't go away, you tend to get better at managing them as you get older.
I love that message. What you're saying really is that it's not about labeling them picky eaters, and it is what it is. It's like there's always things we can do. Treat it like a long-term journey, just like reading to the children. It's part of a process. So I love
absolutely. That. Yeah, absolutely. And teaching an adult to eat less selectively, you're using very much the same methodology as a 2-year-old, because we all learn to eat in the same way, and so much of it's the same. Whether you've got a husband that eats 10 foods or a 2-year-old that eats 10 foods, really the approach is very, very similar.
Yeah. And I've heard about activities like getting the whole family on board, saying, okay, every day we're going to try something new, or maybe every week, it might be like, and they go through the alphabet, like A, like, so today, anything A, that not an apple. So it's going to be either like an avocado or something else that starts with A that is kind of new, and the whole family would try it. So are games or things like that, not challenges, but something where everyone gets on board? Is that quite positive?
That very much depends. If you have an averagely competent child that just, that finds it difficult to branch out into something new, things like games can be a good way to encourage them. If you have an extremely selective eater, that could send them into an absolute panic, and it could be just awful for them, because they go, oh my goodness, it's an avocado. I hate avocados. I can't get anywhere near the avocado. It's really frightening. I can't believe I'm going to have a whole week with the avocado, and it's and actually a negative. So there's a spectrum, obviously, with picky eating, just like a lot of other things, and depending on where you fall will depend on which strategies work. And so that's why a lot of the strategies that would work for your average child can be really quite negative for a child that is an extremely picky eater.
Well, I think this is just highlighting how much of a diverse issue this is. It's not like a blanket thing, right? It's like, that's why having someone like you, who is an expert in your field, to consult with, because some things cannot be helpful. They can actually set them back. So that's good.
Yeah, absolutely.
So let's talk about, in terms of, impact long-term, or let's say someone's been a picky eater, maybe they're a teenager. How can something like getting their eating on track help their confidence in general, socially, and onward as they grow into an adult?
Well, there's actually been studies done on, there's correlation between teenagers being risk averse and being a picky eater, because of course that difficulty branching out in food can often translates into difficulty, or is it the other way around? Because you have a difficulty branching into new things, then you have difficulty branching into new foods. I mean, chicken and egg. But it can be really socially challenging, because your friends will be doing stuff and you're not able to do it. Your boyfriend wants to take you to a restaurant and you're uncomfortable about going, or you're you want to go and stay at someone else's house, but you go, maybe they just won't have the food that I like. So it really is it can be really quite socially isolating. And what's really interesting is that I find that up to about 10 years old, parents, it tends to be their guilty secret, and they tend to hide the severity of their children's eating issues and negotiate around them. And then after 10, the children start to do it, and they become very, very good at not letting anyone know how selective they are and how difficult that is for them. And they become very good at saying, oh, no, I won't be able to make it at 8 o'clock. I'll be there at 9.
Yeah.
And that's just so sad. It's so sad that we're making decisions based around food, when food's such a social thing, and it should be such a joyous thing, and often it's not.
So what I'm hearing is that once people can get some help and really have it not dictate kind of their life so much, it can be very empowering and open up new kind of freedoms in the way that they can live their life, really.
Oh, I remember teaching a 9-year-old to eat pizza, and it was the first time he'd ever been to after school care and being able to share in the pizza with everybody else. And he was so excited. He talked about it for 2 weeks because it was a huge thing for him. And for the rest of us, like, it's pizza. But
no, I'm thinking, did you like cut it into small pieces? Did you take off the pepperoni?
No. We went all the way back and started with just a very plain base that we made ourselves, and we just started with a pizza base, and we went from there, and it took a while to get to that stage, and he'd always wanted to eat pizza, but just the thought of actually putting it in his mouth was just too much. And that's not uncommon. You'd be surprised.
No, that's amazing. All right. So let's, I'd love to hear if you've got, since this is the Impact Entrepreneurs interview, I always ask people if there's a particular book or app or program or something that they want to do a shout out to, or a charity. So I'd love to hear yours. I'll ask you that in a moment. And anyone watching, if you want to go ahead and comment below with any questions or any experiences that you've had on this topic of creating confident eaters and how that can really impact people's happiness in their life. So we'd love to hear your experiences too, or your questions, and Judith can come in and answer your questions later. So Judith, do you have something you'd love to do a shout out to? Absolutely.
I have been working recently with a charity. It used to be the Prison Fellowship, and it's now He Korawai Whakapono, and it is probably best known for Angel Tree. And it's for the families who have a parent in prison. And each year, Angel Tree is their big sort of money raiser for the year. And they attempt to get a present for every child who has a parent or parents in prison, so that they don't miss out at Christmas. And the whole point of the charity is to stop intergenerational incarceration. So they're trying to break that cycle, so that the children don't end up in the same place as the parents. And so, yeah, it's really close to my heart, because it's not the children's fault, and yet, by default, they're in a single parent or even no parent family because of what's happened with their parents.
Amazing. That's great. I see that's one of the reasons I asked this question. There's so many amazing charities that we haven't even heard of before. So what I'll do is, if you give me the link, I'll pop that in the notes as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It'll be fabulous.
Amazing. So while we're talking about you and the impact, can you let us know, I know you've got a book that you've created. So can we hear a little bit about the book, and how can people follow you or contact you on social media or on your website?
Absolutely. So the book is, back to front, Creating Confident Eaters, which is, we call it a guide rather than a book. And what it does is it's that tool for parents. So if your child is just eating toast for breakfast and you want them to eat something else, but they just say, no, I'll only eat toast, how do you take them from toast to something else in simple, gentle, baby steps that's easy for parents and okay for the child? And so we go through a lot of commonly eaten foods like pasta and chicken nuggets and bread and crackers, and we say, okay, how do you move from that to something else.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really, really easy, and you can dip in and out of it, and it's all designed for a parent who's stressed and frustrated and has tried everything and nothing's worked. And it's our experience with, I work with over 100 families a year, and it's all that experience in one place.
Can you show us, give us a little sneak peek in the inside? Because I think it's
absolutely
a workbook, is it?
It is. It's sort of like a workbook. So there, so it's got little cartoons, and we did cartoons deliberately. A, because pictures of toast are not very exciting. B, because I wanted to make it really accessible. I wanted parents to be able to look at it and say, you know what, I can do that. I didn't want something that was glossy where you said, you know what, I love that picture, but there's no way I'm going to be able to remake that in my own house, you know? Yeah. Because this is all about parents and what they can do. There's even a place where we can sort of write notes in it, and we encourage people to do so, so that, you know, if you are working with, you know, and if Gran is taking the kids 3 days a week, you can write little notes, and everybody can be on the same page. And if you'd like to talk to me, and if you've got any questions about, you know, your child, if you're feeling a little bit concerned and you want to know, should you get help, then you can contact me, judith@theconfidenteater.com.
Thank you so much. That's great. And your website's on that poster, which is handy. Would it be true to say that, like, it's never too late in terms of this?
No, it's never too late.
And also, would it be true to say, like, I feel like a lot of people go, oh, I'm sure they'll grow out of it. Do people grow out of it? Or is it more like with the proper guidance, they're going to grow out of it sooner? How does that work?
That's two separate questions. So do people grow out of it? Experts around the world agree that between 5 to 10% of children have eating issues that are so severe they will never grow out of it without intervention. So if you think of a class of 30 kids, 1 to 2 of those will be so selective, it's not just going to magically come good. And a lot of the families I work with, they have a 9-year-old, and they come to me and they say, but everyone said they grow out of it, but they're actually dropping foods rather than adding foods. And that, with a super selective eater, over time they often drop foods rather than add foods, because of course they're eating the same 10 things week in, week out. Excuse me. They have a bad experience. They get bored, so they drop it. So suddenly you've gone from 10 foods to 9 foods, and that actually goes the other way. A lot of children will grow out of it, but my question is always, if that takes 1, 5, or 10 years, are you okay with that? Are you okay with that from a social point of view? Because it often means that you can't go to the restaurants you want to go to, going on holidays, a military campaign. It's embarrassing often when you're with relatives. Your child starts to get socially isolated, you know, and they might not want to go on play dates and all this sort of stuff. If we can speed that up, take away the frustration for parents, give our child back some confidence and give them some social flexibility, why wouldn't we do that? If you're really comfortable with your child eating 15 foods and you go, they're going to grow out of it, you're really happy with that, that's great. But if you're there and your child's eating 20 foods and you go, this is really difficult for me, it's really stressful, I feel really guilty about what they do and they don't eat, I know my child's now starting to struggle socially, that's when you say, well, why not get help?
And what I love about that too is same thing with mental health and happiness and emotions. I feel so strongly that if we can get back to like the kids, right? So when kids are young, if we can teach them how to acknowledge and identify and then process their emotions, how they feel, when they grow up to be a teen, an adult, they're going to have so many more skills, and it's just, they're going to be such a different 30, 40-year-old than they would have been without those skills. And I feel like it's the same with the eating.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, you know, and all of those skills that you learn when you're 2, 3, and 4 carry through so well for later on. But that's not to say you've missed the boat. If you've got a 9, 10, 11, 12-year-old, you can still, you know, instill a lot of those great habits in them.
Yeah, exactly. That's amazing. Thank you so much, Judith. Thank you so much for joining us. This is a crucial topic, and I'm super excited to just see the comments that we get back from people and the questions and the experiences. So that's what this is about, you guys. The Impact Entrepreneurs interviews are all about, I call them conscious conversations, because what Judith and I are, we're just raising this topic. She's sharing her knowledge. I'm asking a few questions that maybe parents might wonder as well. And together we're doing our best to raise the state of mental health and happiness in New Zealand. So thank you for joining us, Judith.
Thanks so much for having me on. And if there are any questions, I'm really happy to jump on later on and answer them.
That would be great. And okay, before we wrap up, is there any kind of final comment or anything else you want to add?
No, I just think it's been lovely. It's great to raise awareness for this, and it's great to have these conversations, because picky eating is often not seen. It's seen as a minor thing, but actually for a parent, 5 times a day, 7 days a week, it can be everything.
Yeah, totally. That's really important to highlight that. Thank you so much. All
Okay.
right, thank you guys for joining. Right. See you next time.
Thank you. Bye.